Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly cinematic and spiritual journey, exploring the deep history and the profound significance behind the two great festivals of Islam. In the Islamic faith, it's understood that Allah gifted believers these two incredibly beautiful festivals. And as we're going to see, these aren't just your standard parties. They are profoundly sacred days, deeply rooted in faith, supreme sacrifice, and a kind of global unity that is just amazing to witness. So, where did all this actually start? Well, when the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, migrated to the historical city of Medina, he found the local people there celebrating a couple of specific days left over from much older traditions. They were basically just days of playing and, having fun. But the Prophet told his followers something revolutionary. As it's recorded in Sunan Abi Dawud, he told them that Allah had actually replaced those days with something infinitely better, Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr. He took those local traditions and fundamentally transformed them into these profoundly sacred, spiritually charged celebrations. That brings us to section 3, a better celebration, from ignorance to devotion. You see, the introduction of these two Eids completely shifted the cultural landscape of early Arabia. If you look at the contrast between these two eras, it's actually pretty remarkable. The pre-Islamic festivals, which are often referred to as the days of ignorance, were mostly characterized by just, days of play, basic cultural celebration, and these boastful tribal displays. But the paradigm shift brought by the two Eids, it elevated the whole human spirit. These became incredibly sacred days where the focus shifted away from the tribe and toward immense gratitude, mandatory charity to the poor, and divine remembrance. Moving on to section 4, Eid al-Fitr and Ramadan. Now, Eid al-Fitr literally translates to the festival of breaking the fast. It is the intensely joyful, emotional culmination of the blessed month of Ramadan. It's a festival deeply rooted in the endurance of fasting, the spiritual practice of patience, and, this is crucial, charitable giving. In fact, before the Eid prayer even begins, Muslims have to give a specific charity called Zakat al-Fitr. That's just to make absolutely sure that the poor can also share in the joy of the day. And hey, speaking of the joy of Ramadan and Eid, there's this really fascinating cultural artifact that evolved alongside it, the traditional Ramadan lantern, or the fanos. It actually started way back in 969 AD during the Fatimid era. The story goes that Egyptians walked out to the edges of the desert holding these simple torches and lanterns to welcome the caliph to Cairo during Ramadan. Over time, during the Mamluk era, Egyptian artisans started adding these intricate geometric engravings to them. Then, by the Ottoman era, vibrant stained glass and rich colors were introduced. So what started out as just a practical tool completely evolved into this timeless, global symbol of joy. All right, section 5, History of the Kaaba, the ancient house. To really understand the second Eid, we have to shift our focus over to the holiest site in Islam. The Kaaba is that iconic, cube-shaped stone building right at the center of the Great Mosque in Mecca. It serves as the axis of the Islamic world. It's the direction all Muslims face when they pray, and it's the ultimate destination of the Hajj pilgrimage. The origins of this ancient house are recorded right there in the Quran. And remember, Ibrahim and Ismail raised the foundations of the house. Islamic tradition holds that the Prophet Ibrahim, or Abraham, and his son Ismail were commanded by Allah to build or rebuild this structure. By doing so, they established it as the very first house on earth dedicated entirely to pure monotheistic worship. Now, central to visiting the Kaaba is a sacred practice known as tawaf. This is the act of walking around the Kaaba 7 times in a counterclockwise direction. Just imagine the emotional power of this scene for a second. Millions of Muslims, from literally every corner of the globe, stripped of all their worldly status indicators, moving together in perfect harmony. It is this profound, physical demonstration of the unity of believers in their devotion to one God. And you've probably noticed that the visual majesty of the Kaaba today is largely defined by the kiswa. That's the magnificent black silk and gold embroidered curtain that drapes over it, and it's actually replaced annually during the Hajj pilgrimage. A key feature of the kiswa is the stunning classical Arabic calligraphy woven right into it using gold and silver threads. It features verses from the Quran and supplications, totally reflecting the immense reverence held for this sacred site. But wow, the history of this building is dramatic. Around 600 CE, before his prophethood, Muhammad actually helped rebuild the Kaaba. He famously placed the black stone into position with his own hands to prevent a massive tribal war. Then, in 630 CE, when he returned to conquer Mecca, his very first act was to clear the Kaaba of 360 pagan idols, restoring it to monotheism. Later on, in 683 CE, the building was severely damaged by fire during a siege. And perhaps most shockingly, in 930 CE, a sect known as the Qarmashians attacked Mecca and actually stole the sacred black stone. They held it for over 20 years. So yeah, the Kaaba has endured some astonishing trials. Which brings us to Section 6, Eid al-Adha and Hajj. This is the second great festival in Islam. Just as Eid al-Fitr is tied to Ramadan, Eid al-Adha is inextricably linked to the completion of the Hajj pilgrimage at the Kaaba, and it represents the ultimate test of faith. It is super important to understand the distinction between the two. While Eid al-Fitr marks the joyful completion of the fasting month of Ramadan, Eid al-Adha marks the completion of the Hajj pilgrimage. But it goes way beyond just marking the end of a trip. Eid al-Adha is fundamentally about honoring an immense historical sacrifice. That sacrifice is the real emotional core of this festival. Eid al-Adha remembers the absolute obedience of the Prophet Ibrahim. According to tradition, Ibrahim was tested by Allah and asked to sacrifice the thing he loved most in the world, his own son. Because he was completely willing to submit to Allah's command, Allah miraculously replaced his son with a ram at the very last moment. This incredible act of faith became a timeless lesson, and it's the reason Muslims around the world perform an animal sacrifice during Eid al-Adha, sharing that meat with family, friends, and the poor. All right, our final section, the takbir and unity. As we wrap up this explainer, let's look at how Muslims around the globe actually prepare for and unite in celebration of these incredibly sacred days. There are specific prophetic traditions, known as sunnahs, that guide exactly how you should behave on Eid, ensuring it's a day of joy, cleanliness, and community. It's recommended to take a bath before the prayer and to eat something, like a few dates, before leaving for Eid al-Fitr, just to show the fast is truly over. You're supposed to wear your absolute best clothes too. It's also a tradition to walk to the prayer area, exchange gifts to foster love, and, get this, even take a different route home from the prayer, just so you can spread greetings of peace to as many different people as possible. And throughout all this walking and gathering, the air is just filled with a specific, deeply powerful chant called the takbir. It carries these profound layers of meaning. First, Allahu Akbar, declaring that Allah is the greatest above all worldly concerns. Second, La ilaha illallah, the foundational declaration of faith, that there is no God worthy of worship except Allah. And finally, Alhamdulillah, all praise and deep gratitude belong to Allah. When millions of people chant this loudly, in perfect unison on the morning of Eid, wow, it reinforces a spectacular feeling of global unity, gratitude, and absolute awe. Which leaves us with this final thought. Eid isn't just a party, it is a profound spiritual reset. It's a built-in reminder to stay deeply connected to Allah, and just as importantly, to care for one another through charity and love. So I want you to ask yourself, how will you carry the incredible lessons of unity, the spirit of selfless sacrifice, and the deep gratitude of these two great festivals into your everyday life? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. And to continue your journey into the rich tapestry of Islamic history, be sure to subscribe to the Iftihar Learning Hub. Eid Mubarak.